So this is an interesting one. Here we have array1 fix23, or fix23 rather, I think is what is being conveyed here. So we're given an integer array of length 3. So we're going to have an array of length 3, which means we have 3 elements. But of course, the total number of indexes that we have began from 0 and then work its way up all the way to the length of the array. But of course, it's going to be 1 less than the array itself, or the length of the array itself will be 1 less than the length of the array itself. So if in fact there is a 2 in the array immediately followed by a 3, in other words, if a 2 is sort of detected anywhere in the array and the next element in the array is in fact a 3, then we're going to set 3 to element 0. We're not going to set 2 to element 0, we're going to set 3 to element 0. So in other words, if there is in fact a 2, if nums of I, that is of course the index which references any given element in the array as we perhaps traverse through the array, if nums of I is equal to 3, or rather 2, then the next element in the array will essentially be set to 0, and of course if of course that number is 3. So we set the so we're going to and after that we're going to return the changed array. So I think as far as the strategy is concerned, we are firstly going to check. Well, first, actually, let's actually establish a means by which we can actually look through the entire array. And so that means will be we're going to use a for loop to traverse the array. And if at all, of course, as we were looking at each element on any given iteration, if that element is equal to 2, then I'm sure what we can do is we can look at the next element, and which of course would be achieved by incrementing I, and we'll see if that is a 3, and if it is, then essentially we are going to set 3, but of course not actually 3 itself, but the index, or rather the element. Well, essentially we want to set the element equal to 3, but really looking at it from a bigger picture, we actually want to set what is inside that box equal to 3, and we can only access that box if we essentially access the index which is referencing that box. And so we're essentially going to set nums I equal to 0, if of course we have a 2 in the array. And at this point, I'm fairly certain that we can just return, or rather we want to populate the array with that element. Or no, that is not what is being asked here. We want to return the changed array. Okay, so after we're done doing that, after the for loop is done iterating, I'm sure we're done with our constraint, and we're done with setting all our 3's equal to 0 if of course they are previously, or they are following a 2. So we want to return the changed array. So like I said, we're going to be using a for loop. So let's actually zoom in here to get a better look. So we have int I is equal to 0. I should be less than nums.length, because we are aware of a relationship between the length of the array and the total amount of indexes which are inclusive in the array itself, which is of course to say that the length of the array, or rather the index, the total number of indexes in the array will be 1 less than the length of the array itself. And so we have this relationship that we only want to increment such that I is less than nums.length, so that we don't actually iterate length times, we actually iterate 1 less than the length of the array times. And so as we're inside this for loop here, I'm sure we want to judge whether or not any given element at any given iteration is essentially equal to 2. And of course, if it is, we want to check whether the next element is essentially equal to 3. And of course, if that is the case, then we'll set whatever index that was equal to 0. And after that is said and done, I'm sure after the for loop is done doing its business, we would have changed each and every element in the array each and every element in the array would have, well, only the 3's which are followed by 2 would be set to 0 after it's all said and done. But I think something we want to take into account for is what if 2 is at the end of the array? So if we had elements like 1, 2, and 3. So if we're here at the last index, which is of course the second index, referencing the third element, if we're here and this is a 2, or let's just change this to 3. If this is a 2, then we see that, okay, if nums of I is equal to 2, which it would be at this particular position, then we're incrementing the index, and so we're accessing the next element in the array, which doesn't actually exist, which would lead us to an array index out of bounds error. So in order to avoid that, let's actually we want to increment exactly the number of indexes that we have, which is, of course, I should be less than nums.length minus 1. And as we do that, I'm fairly certain that this itself, now that we've made these changes and ensured that we're not actually walking off the edge of the array, I'm fairly certain we can just return the array and get a favorable outcome. And we're actually missing a parentheses, it seems. Let's see here. So if nums, so where are we missing a parentheses? So it seems like we have our method, and then of course we have our for loop, and then of course we have our major if statement, and then within that we have our sort of nested if statement. But it seems here we've added these not useless, but perhaps redundant numbers to actually run the code itself. And we've actually added another equals sign here. And after we make those changes, you can see that we actually have all greens. Now, I would say that we can actually merge some of these statements together to make our code a little more efficient. We could say that we can actually take care of this if entirely. So we can say if nums of I is equal to 2, and of course nums of I plus 1 is essentially equal to 3, then and only then will we set whatever nums of I was equal to 0. And so after we sort of do this here, you can see that we'll still get a favorable outcome. But of course, I have to stop using two equal signs if that is the case. And then, of course, we get all greens.